What if the person you cannot stand is the very person you are meant to heal with? The thought alone might stir something deep. Frustration, disbelief, maybe even pain. But stay with it. Because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." That is not just a powerful quote. It is a call to action. It asks us to see love not as something soft or sentimental, but as something strong, transformational. A force powerful enough to break the cycle of bitterness and resentment. And it begins with a single decision. But what does that quote really mean in today's world? In a world where disagreements turn into division and broken trust often feels impossible to mend, what does love actually look like? And more importantly, how does it apply to you? In this video, we are exploring how to transform conflict into connection. Even with the people who have hurt us the most, even with those we once saw as enemies. So here is the question worth sitting with. What would it take for your worst relationship to become your greatest story of growth? This is not about idealism or grand speeches. This is personal. It is about your relationships, your pain, your potential. And if you are ready to turn enemies into allies, it starts within you. Take a breath, open your mind, and let's begin. You probably already know who it is. That one person who rises to the surface of your heart whenever the word enemy comes up. Maybe it's someone who betrayed your trust in a way that still echoes today. Maybe it's someone who never once offered an apology, not even an acknowledgement. Or maybe, just maybe, it's someone who still doesn't fully understand the damage they caused, walking around unaware while you carry the weight of what happened. But here is the deeper truth, and it is not an easy one. That pain you feel is not just a memory filed away in some emotional archive. It lingers. It follows you. It subtly influences how you think, how you guard yourself, and how you move through the world. It builds quiet walls inside of you. Sometimes you do not even realize how much it is costing you until something small triggers a reaction that feels way too big. So pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, is it possible that the person you avoid the most is the person you most need to forgive? Not because they deserve it, not because they have asked for it, but because your peace is too valuable to keep handing over to someone who may never change. This is not about excusing what they did. Forgiveness is not permission for harm. It is release. It is you deciding not to let the past chain your present or poison your future. Dr. King never pretended love was easy. He did not romanticize it. He told the truth. Love is the only force powerful enough to transform an enemy into a friend. Not silence, not revenge, not bitterness, not distance. Only love. A love that chooses to rise even when everything in you wants to shut down. A love that rewrites the story, not for them, but for you. Love, not the movie kind. Not the version that wraps itself in cinematic music, sweeping gestures, and perfect timing. And certainly not the kind we scroll past online, all dressed up for likes and approval, filtered until it barely resembles anything real. We are talking about something far more honest. A kind of love that does not always feel soft, but is always strong. A kind of love that is not about performance, but about presence. It is the kind that doesn't always feel like love in the moment, but reveals itself over time by the way it heals, softens, and strengthens the spaces between people. This love will not go viral. It will not show up in perfect form, but it will show up when it matters most. This is the kind of love that shows up when you least want to give it. When judging someone would feel justified. When walking away would feel easier. When silence feels like protection and bitterness feels like control. Instead, this love chooses to stay curious. It chooses to listen when your heart is still aching. It leans in when everything in you wants to pull away. It is the kind of love that refuses to reduce a person to the worst thing they have ever done. It looks deeper. It sees the fear behind the anger, the shame behind the defensiveness, the humanity behind the mistake. And instead of responding with punishment, it dares to respond with patience. Instead of blame, it offers grace. This kind of love doesn't yell. It doesn't always speak. But it has a presence that is unforgettable. And when it is given, it shifts something at the core of a person. Have you ever received that kind of love? Think back, not to the moments where everything was good, but to the moments where you were at your lowest. Maybe you were ashamed, certain that people would walk away. But someone stayed. Maybe you expected coldness and were met with compassion. Maybe you failed and braced for judgment, only to be met with understanding instead. How did that moment shape you? Did it pull you out of a dark place? Did it remind you that you were more than your mistakes? That you were still worthy of being seen and loved? And now, the more challenging reflection. When was the last time you gave that kind of love? When was the last time you allowed someone else the space to be more than their failure? When you looked past the anger and reached for the heart underneath it? Not because they deserved it, not because it was easy, but because you recognized that this kind of love, the hard kind, is the only thing that can break cycles and build bridges. If you truly want to turn enemies into allies, then this kind of love cannot remain a beautiful idea you admire from a distance. It cannot live only in quotes or theories or hopes. It must be lived. It must be chosen again and again, even when it feels uncomfortable, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Because the path from conflict to connection does not begin with being right. It does not begin with proving a point or defending a position. It begins with being willing. Willing to see the person across from you not as a problem, but as a human being. Willing to take the first step, even when you are scared of being hurt again. Willing to believe that something new is possible, even after everything that has happened. That kind of love is not easy. But it is the only thing strong enough to create lasting change. If we are being honest, holding on to anger can feel like the right thing to do. It feels like strength. It gives us something to cling to when we've been hurt. Anger can create a sense of control, like a shield that keeps us from getting hurt again. It can feel like protection, like power. It helps us feel like we are standing up for ourselves. And in many ways, that's true. Anger often begins as a response to something unjust, something painful, something that left a mark. But over time, that anger begins to change. It no longer just lives in that one moment. It starts to settle in. It begins to bleed into how we speak, how we trust, how we move through the world. We carry it with us into other relationships, into new opportunities, into places that had nothing to do with the original wound. And without realizing it, we begin to shape our lives around our pain instead of our potential. Bitterness has a way of quietly spreading. it is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it's just the tension you feel when someone brings up that person's name. Sometimes, it's the guardedness in your tone when you're with someone new. Sometimes, it's the exhaustion that comes from carrying the weight of what was never resolved. And while it might feel like you're protecting yourself, the truth is, you're also punishing yourself. So ask yourself, honestly, what have you been sacrificing by holding on? Is it your clarity? Are you unable to focus because your thoughts keep circling back to the past? Is it your sleep, disrupted by the unrest of an unsettled heart? Is it your energy, drained by the effort it takes to keep the pain alive? Is it your future, slowly being shaped by something that should no longer have a say in who you become? Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means pretending everything is fine, that you're saying what happened was acceptable. But that is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not approval. It is not forgetting. It is not weakness. Forgiveness means you are done carrying the burden that was never yours to begin with. It means you are choosing peace over pride. It means you are refusing to let the actions of another person decide the quality of your life. And that is where the real shift begins. Because when you let go of that grip, when you stop rehearsing the pain, something inside you begins to open. You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that were tied up in resentment. You start to breathe differently. You move more freely. And slowly, the person who once had power over your emotions no longer gets to write the story of your days. That's the decision. That is where transformation begins. Not with changing them, not with waiting for an apology that may never come, but with choosing to release the anger that has held you hostage. Because when you do, your peace returns, your clarity sharpens, and your future opens up again. That is how enemies begin to lose their power. Not because they changed, but because you did. You decided to stop carrying what was never meant to define you. If there's one truth that rings louder than most, it's this. It takes courage to love someone who has wounded you. Real courage. The kind that chooses peace over pride. The kind that lays down ego in order to pick up empathy. It's not about being weak. It's about being brave enough to lead with something deeper than resentment. To speak without spite. To approach without the invisible armor you've worn for so long. To show up without needing to dominate or defend. These are not easy acts. They are acts of emotional strength that require a kind of maturity that doesn't always come naturally. But what if you chose that path? What if you stepped into that moment? Not to win, not to prove a point, but to heal? What would that conversation even sound like? Imagine sitting across from the person who betrayed you. Could you speak honestly, without rehearsing every defense in your mind? Could you listen without planning your next response? And maybe the most vulnerable question of all is this. Could you open yourself up to trust again? Could you even want to? Then again, sometimes the question isn't about what they did to you. Sometimes the spotlight turns back around. Sometimes the harder question is this. Do you need to be forgiven by someone else? Have you become the person someone else is trying to heal from? It's a sobering thought, but it's a necessary one, because healing rarely flows in just one direction. Often, it's a loop we must both give and receive. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." That statement wasn't just poetic, it was radical. Because sometimes The enemy you need to transform is someone else. But sometimes, it's the voice inside your own mind, the shame, the guilt, the pride, the fear. Because here's the truth at the heart of it all. You can turn enemies into allies with one decision. One intentional, courageous choice. That's what Dr. King believed. Not in theory, but in practice. Not someday, but now. Whether the conflict lives outside of you or within, the decision remains the same. You can hold on, or you can heal. You can choose ego, or you can choose love. And in the end, no one else can make that choice for you. The decision is yours. Meanwhile, if this all feels overwhelming, take a breath. You are not expected to fix everything in a single moment. The path to transforming enemies into allies does not begin with a grand gesture or dramatic confrontation. It starts with something much smaller and far more sincere. It begins within you. Start by acknowledging the hurt, not for anyone else, but for yourself. Privately, without filters, without pretending it did not matter. Name what happened. Own how it affected you. Denying it does not make it disappear, and minimizing it does not make you stronger. Strength begins with truth. Then, take a bold and quiet step into empathy. This is not about excusing what they did. It is about asking the hard question. What might they have been carrying when they hurt you? What pain, what pressure, what fear or misunderstanding could have shaped their actions? You are not trying to justify the wrong. You are simply trying to understand the person behind it. Empathy invites humanity back into the picture. When you are ready, consider reaching out. Not with the expectation that everything will be healed overnight. Not to win. Not to prove a point. But to show that you are choosing love over ego. Maybe it is a conversation. Maybe it is a letter. Maybe it is just a quiet shift in the way you speak about them or hold space for their memory. Whatever it looks like, let it come from a place of clarity. You are not doing this to get something in return. You are doing it to release what no longer serves you. The truth is, not every broken relationship will be restored. Some people will never apologize. Some wounds will not close in the way you hoped. But even in those cases, love still wins. Because choosing love means you no longer carry bitterness in your body. You no longer give that pain the power to define you. You walk away lighter. You walk away free. And in a world that constantly encourages division, retaliation, and pride, that kind of freedom is radical. That kind of choice is revolutionary. And that is exactly where change begins. Right here, right now. With one decision, yours. Nonetheless, you might not be facing a public enemy. There may not be someone standing in front of you, shouting, accusing, or openly opposing you. But what about the quiet ones? The subtle tensions, the hidden rifts, the unspoken disappointments that live closer to home? Think about the coworker who constantly undermines you. Not in explosive ways, but in the small, calculated comments during meetings or the passive resistance that chips away at your confidence. Think about the friend who slowly disappeared from your life. No falling out, no dramatic moment, just a slow fade that left you wondering what you did wrong. Or the family member who keeps crossing the same boundary again and again, despite your efforts to make it clear that it hurts. These are not the enemies we announce to the world, but they are the ones that quietly occupy space in our minds and hearts. And the truth is, those relationships often leave deeper marks than we like to admit. Now ask yourself, How would your world shift if you approached just one of those people with love instead of defense? What might happen if you stepped toward understanding, even while holding firm to your boundaries? What if the next conversation was less about being right and more about being real? This is what it means to turn enemies into allies. Not by ignoring the pain, not by pretending everything is fine, but by choosing a posture of love, even when the history suggests otherwise. By deciding that peace is more important than pride and healing more important than control. It is the one decision that changes the energy of every room you walk into. Because love does not just mend relationships, it transforms atmospheres. And in that transformation, something remarkable happens. The tension begins to loosen, the emotional weight begins to lift, and the people around you start to feel it too. This is where conflict turns into connection, not because everything is resolved, but because you chose to bring something healing into the room. You chose love when ego would have been easier, and that choice, that one decision, changes everything. If something stirred in you today, if a name came to mind or a moment from the past started to shift in your heart, share it in the comments. This is not just a video. It is a reflection. It is a moment to pause, reflect, and maybe begin again. Every video on this channel is created to help you look at your life honestly, with courage, and find the small openings that lead to growth. Because no matter how long the conflict has lingered, no matter how far apart you have grown, you are not beyond connection. Love might not fix everything overnight, but it is the one decision that changes everything from the inside out. We will see you in the next one. Until then, choose love. Not because it is easy, but because it is the only thing that transforms enemies into friends.